Hi, this is Scott Garibay, and today we are going to talk specifically about the right mix of content for healthy, vibrant, useful to dungeon masters, useful to players, useful to the community, perhaps useful to Wizards of the Coast, perhaps useful to Hasbro Gaming, useful Dungeons and Dragons commentary channel. All right, so this is going to be me commentating on D&D commentating. And I'll just give you a little warning. I'm going to probably be on this for a little bit, where I'm just kind of commentating on D&D commentating. We're here, right? We have Dungeons and Dragons has been like, thanks to Mike Merles, who has done an absolutely tremendous job with creating Dungeons and Dragons as an unstoppable brand, rescuing the game from a very real threat of disappearing forever, being surpassed by scrub games like Pathfinder. Like, come on, like that does speak volumes about what happened with 4th edition. If you make an edition of the game that allows you to get surpassed by Pathfinder, ooh, that's rough, right? So Mike Merles has really been incredibly successful at making Dungeons and Dragons an incredibly robust, vibrant, resilient brand. Okay, yeah, all right. So basically, we've gotten to this point where we have a community of we have a Dungeons and Dragons community. We have a Dungeons and Dragons Dungeon Master community. We have a Dungeons and Dragons player community. By the way, the Dungeons and Dragons player community is very small. I think, mostly, player. There really hasn't been a strong organization of player concerns, people who speak for players, like in the pro sports, right? There are champions of the player base. There are very few champions of, like, I don't know a single D&D commentator who isn't a dungeon master. Not one. I don't know a single. That's a great point. That doesn't even exist, right? There are no D&D commentator players. None. Right? Like, it's crazy, right? So that's really interesting to me. That'd be like if, in the sports leagues, the only people that commented on sports were the coaches, right? Like what the heck, right? So there's a lot that there still needs to happen to make the D&D player community as resilient and robust and vibrant as the Dungeons & Dragons Dungeon Master community, right? So that's a very real thing. So you have all this going on, and what I want to talk about today is just this idea of what if you have a Dungeons & Dragons commentating channel. And by the way, there's at least 1,000 of these. There's at least 1,000 channels between YouTube and shit, and I think the number's between 1,000 and 10,000 channels that do nothing but commentate on Dungeons & Dragons, right? So now that we have this community and we're recognizing this community of commentators, right? Beyond the D&D overall community, beyond the D&D player community, beyond the D&D Dungeon Master community, also there's now a Dungeons & Dragons designer community. That's the DM's Guild, people just making adventures, right? So you have all that going on, but there's also this community of D&D commentators, and I think we've reached a point where we really need to think globally and at the community level about what we're doing, why we're doing it, and do it intentionally. So today I want to talk about what is the right mix of content for a healthy, vibrant, resilient, robust Dungeons & Dragons commentating channel, okay? So first of all, one, we don't get to the right answer until we frame the question and then explore the answers that are there. So that's one of the reasons why I'm taking this exercise. So let's get into this. All right, so what is the correct amount? So let's do it by percentage, okay? So first of all, practical optimization, theoretical optimization of character builds, right? So building a character is definitely content for Dungeons & Dragons, okay? I think it's the least valuable form of content, and I think it should, for any channel, it should be 25% of the 25% of the channel's capacity max, right? It shouldn't be. If you have people who just do build, right? Now, one, I'm not saying I am saying there's something wrong with it, right? So what I'm saying specifically is, one, if you want some scrub channel that feeds a bunch of monster players incredibly strong builds so they can ruin tables, you could do that, right? Like, if you don't want to think about the the structure of what content you have, how much content is enough, how much of this content is too much, right? You can have some scrub channel that serves a bunch of monster players who really are out there just ruining tables. That's what your channel could be. That is wrong. Like, I'm saying that now, right? If you're not thinking about the content in your channel, then you're probably not going to land in a good place, right? If you're just doing what gets views, you're not going to have a channel that helps the D&D Dungeon Master community, that helps the D&D player community, that helps the D&D commentator community, that helps the D&D designer community, right? And even professional community, right? You can create some, nonsense channel that really doesn't help people. What I'm talking about here is channels that help pretty much all, at some level, of the different facets of our community. Okay? All right. So basically, 25% no more off of just character builds and character optimization. Okay? 25% of your content should be how to be a better dungeon master, in my opinion. You should absolutely do that. You should, give yourself the ability to have a Dungeons and Dragons how to be a better dungeon master. It's incredibly important. It's definitely helpful to players and DMs. It's helpful to designers, all of that, right? So 25% of your content should be how to be a better DM, how to make, and it can be content that just makes the lives of DMs easier. They're making better stories with less effort, right? It's a very, very important aspect of what we do as Dungeons and Dragons players. Okay, very, very important aspect of it. So with all that, right? So that now we're at 50%, right? So you're doing 50%. You're doing 25% player, content build, how to build a better character. You're doing 25% to what to do to be a better dungeon master. What else do we have? Well, 15%. Here we go. Innovation in in the life element that is Dungeons and Dragons. Innovation, doing something in a new way to produce a better result or a unique result, right? By the way, why would you choose a unique result if it might not be better? Well, there are scout parties, okay? So some tables, right? Let's define a table as a dungeon master and 4 players. It might scale up, it might scale down, right? But you know what I mean. You got an engaged dungeon dragon, you have an engaged dungeon master, and you have an engaged set of 4 players, right? And so you have your table, right? So some tables, they're telling stories, they're building better DMs, they're building better players. Some tables are filled with 5 awesome DMs. They've been playing the game for 5-10 years. They know it extremely well. They're telling stories that everybody at the table is happy and is having a good time, right? Those could be scout tables, right? Scout groups. These are groups of DMs. These are tables. Let's just call them tables. These are tables that can go out and really find new paths and kind of bushwhack, right? They can try unique new ideas in dungeon mastering, in playing, right? And really find new paths that fail. And then when it fails at their table, they can report that out through blogs, through D&D commentary, through through podcasts, all those different channels, and say, we tried this and it failed, right? And steer other people away. And there might even be just small lessons in the failure. Failure is highly valuable. Americans hate it and they don't really give it the value it should, but failure is incredibly valuable, right? So you have that, and I think that's important. It's important that we recognize that this is out there, and there are going to be these bushwhacking tables, these ones that really test things for the community and find cool new ways to play the game, play the life element that is Dungeons and Dragons, right? So all of that is there, right? So 15% should be pure innovation. What's the next 15%? The next 15% should be philosophy. There is deep philosophical concerns with the life element that is Dungeons and Dragons. Dungeons and Dragons is a vector for art, a vector for literature, a vector for gaming, right? And here's a perfect example, right? Seth Skorkowski is a brilliant D&D commentator, one of the best. Wait, I hear you're like, wait, Seth Skorkowski doesn't commentate on D&D. He commentates on Traveler. He is a D&D commentator, right? That's a broader subject. But if you are a tabletop role-playing game, and you're a commentator, you've already commented on D&D. And Seth Skorkowski absolutely has content on D&D. And by him choosing to double down on Traveler and do a whole bunch of content on Traveler, he's still commenting on D&D. It's a broader subject that I could go on for a full video on sometime, but he's a D&D commentator. All right, so Seth Skorkowski, he is out there doing his deal, and he's a great Dungeons and Dragons commentator, great tabletop role-playing game commentator, and he brought up a really good point recently where philosophy, right? And he does philosophical posts, right? And he really gets into he talked about Dungeons and Dragons alignment, right? So he's in the middle of a Traveler video and he starts talking about Dungeons and Dragons alignment, right? And he said, I don't like alignment. It shouldn't be in the game. It's stupid, right? You've heard it a million times. It's a very misunderstood, very limited, shallow understanding of alignment. Actually, Dungeons and Dragons having alignment is deeply philosophical. Seth Skorkowski defined evil in a Traveler commentator, in a video that was meant to comment on Traveler. He ended up giving a definition for evil. The definition of evil was completely Seth Skorkowski's definition of evil. It wasn't grounded in any kind of like sacred text. It wasn't grounded in any kind of it was just literally his opinion, right? But he went into this big long philosophical discussion of the nature of evil, right? Because Dungeons and Dragons has alignment, right? Which means that when you play Dungeons and Dragons, when you Dungeon Master Dungeons and Dragons, you need to answer the question, do I know as a person what evil is? That is deeply philosophical. So 15% of your commentary should be philosophy connected to Dungeons and Dragons, right? So we have 25% be a better DM, 25% build a better character. We have 15% philosophy, right? And we have 15% innovation. What should 20% of your commentary on should be on? 20% of the commentary in a good Dungeons and Dragons commentary, in a good Dungeons and Dragons commentary channel should be on the tabletop role-playing game industry. Other games, right? And the business of tabletop role-playing games. Now, why on earth should we be talking about Tales of Equestria on a Dungeons & Dragons channel? Because Tales of Equestria doesn't exist without Dungeons & Dragons. And if Dungeons & Dragons falters and less people are playing it, Tales of Equestria absolutely will be impacted, right? All of the entire indie industry of tabletop role-playing games is not strong enough to stand on its own. The flagship is a rigid support for all indie tabletop role-playing games. So any bright, useful, resilient, vibrant D&D commentary channel really should be talking about the industry, because D&D is the rigid framework that the entire industry stands on. I'm ready for there to be a new game that's strong enough to stand on its own. They don't exist. They do not exist, right? This hobby's fate is tied to the fate of D&D. No independent tabletop role-playing games can hope for a failure of Dungeons & Dragons, because it could mean the failure of the industry. That's where we're at, okay? We just need to understand that. All that is my opinion. What do you think? What do you think about, what is your opinion on how the breakdown should be? What are your percentages? Let me know in the comments below. Please consider liking and subscribing, and have a wonderful millennium.